Believe it's 11 o'clock and we will get started. Thank you guys for joining. Good morning. I'm sure some of you know at least one of these two people, the fellow on your right, but you may not know the man on the left. He's famous for delivering a talk that was based on answering this question. What wisdom would you try to impart to the world if you knew it was your last chance? His name was Randy Pouch, a father, a husband, and a computer scientist at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Randy had already been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when he was asked to give a last lecture, one in a series where professors imagine what they would talk about in their final lesson. Most people don't deliver one under such pressing circumstances, which made his lecture even more compelling. His talk to students at his school was recorded. It became a YouTube sensation. Soon he was on Oprah and Good Morning America, and then finally he came out with a book called The Last Lecture. Randy's story is remarkable, partly because it showed great human resilience in the face of personal tragedy. He knew his time on earth was limited. He knew the day he would die, as he said, would be like pushing his family off a cliff. So he sat out. He set out while still strong to do what he could to build a net that would catch them and cushion the blow of his departure. I picked out a few of his notable quotes from his lecture. Let's read a couple. The key question to keep asking is, are you spending your time on the right things? Because time is all you have. Be prepared. Luck is truly where preparation meets opportunity. To be cliche, death is part of life and it's going to happen to all of us. I have the blessing of getting a little bit of advance notice and I'm able to optimize my use of time down the home stretch. Randy died quietly at home in July of 2008, about 10 months after he gave his last lecture. He was surrounded by his family. I think it's safe to say he left his family and his children in the world with a deep personal message about his values, his beliefs, his wisdom, and not just for his wife and children, but really also his children's children. The chain of generations we all have a link in. I think if you could ever say that someone had a good death, it was certainly Randy Pouch. The details of Randy's death stand in contrast to those of this man, the actor and producer James Gandolfini. You may remember him as Tony Soprano, the mafia crime boss and lead character in the HBO hit series The Sopranos. Unlike Randy Pouch, James Gandolfini died suddenly at age 51 while on a trip to Italy. It was a shock to his fans and his family. No one saw it coming. Unfortunately, he hadn't done a thorough job planning his affairs. He left 80% of his estate to his sisters and daughter in such a way that it triggered a painful $30 million tax bill. And unlike Randy Pouch, James Gandolfini didn't get to play a role in writing his final legacy. Instead, his ending had a strong resemblance to the controversial last scene of The Sopranos. If you were a fan, you may remember it. Tony arranges to meet his family for dinner at a local diner. First, his wife Carmela arrives, then his son AJ. Tony orders fried onion rings for the table while they await his daughter, Meadow. Tony keeps looking at the door, checking for his daughter's arrival. The camera jump cuts to the daughter outside trying to park her car, and then back to Tony. The tension builds. He keeps looking up. We're all wondering who's going to come in the door, Meadow or a mafia hitman. And then finally, the screen goes black. The finale to the six-season series ends. The storyline left unresolved. No deathbed scene, no final words, just a jarring cut to black, just as James Gandolfini's real life ended too. So in the opposite manner of Randy Pouch, James Gandolfini didn't get to write his story for the ages. I hope you can see in our little tale of two families here a hint of the topics we're going to touch on today. Namely, the importance and seriousness of thinking through your legacy and planning for the next generation. It's never too soon to do that. Now, before we go on, I just want to stop and take a second to formally introduce us. Today's presentation will be hosted by Kelle Huffman, a great team member here at Southeast Retirement Planners and an advisor. She's also our expert in the estate planning and trust area with our clients. And I'm Les Stewart. I'm a financial advisor and partner here, co-owner at Southeast Retirement Planners. So welcome to today's presentation. I thank you for joining and committing your time to learning more about the legacy planning for the next generation. When no legacy planning is done, we see a range of unhappy outcomes that often impact multiple generations. We'll talk more about those in a minute. Of course, we don't want that to happen to you and your family. So that's why I do this presentation. And we also want to assure you that it's not a sales presentation. We'll also be extending an invitation to you to start developing your own legacy plan for your family. I'll tell you more about that later. And when it comes to today's topic, it's not the stuffy old version of traditional estate planning. Instead, we see legacy planning in a broader, more positive light that will help you find meaning in your life and make sure it counts for something to your loved ones who will stay behind a while longer. As we saw Randy Pouch in the last lecture, he recounted his childhood dreams, the outstanding people he had met in his lifetime, and the lessons he learned along the way. You can look it up on YouTube. I watched it again yesterday. It's great. The lecture's been seen and read by millions of people. Now that's a legacy. Yours may not be as far reaching as his, but it will be just as meaningful to your own family. More so even because it's yours. So let's continue with trying to understand the seriousness of the problem many families face here, and then look at some solutions that can start to help you and your family avoid the worst kind of results. We can see here one aspect of the problem we face. Many people haven't thought through how they want their money and estate handled after they're gone. They think they have forever to plan this, and they don't, what could go wrong. And not reflected here are people who have given it some thought, but not recently, or just not fully, as in the case of James Gandolfini. But things do go wrong. Maybe you died before you got everything set up. You got hit by a bus before you even had a chance to tell people you loved them, much less write a will or start writing down your memories. Terrible, terrible thought, right? Well, let's just consider what could happen in the aftermath of your untimely death. Your family's left grieving and in the dark with about what you own, where everything is, and what your wishes are. Think about your closest next of kin, your spouse or children. First, they're in shock to learn of your untimely death. They start going through your papers. What will they find? A neat folder marked open in case of my death, with all your assets listed and your wishes clearly spelled out, or a hodgepodge of papers that make no sense to anyone but you. And now you're gone. Or your estate planning documents are missing, incomplete, or in conflict with one another. Perhaps you never got around to making a will, so no one knows who you want your assets to go to. Or if you did sign a will, maybe it's in conflict with your beneficiary designations. This happens. People update their will, they get remarried, but forget to update their IRA and other investment beneficiary designations, which still lists the ex-spouse. Let me ask you, if you died tomorrow, how would your assets be distributed? Do you even know? Family members start arguing over what you would have wanted or, what you wouldn't have wanted. And, granted, you're not around to see the turmoil, but I'm asking you to imagine it now. Without clear instructions from you, what would your family members say to one another? Would there be arguments over what you would have wanted? You may have heard of normal, loving families who turned on one another after a parent died without a will. It can bring out the worst in people. If there is no will or trust, the estate goes into probate. This means the court takes over and divides the assets based on the state law. This may or may not be what you want. Probate fees are deducted from your estate, leaving less for your heirs. If you were to die tomorrow, do you know if your estate would owe estate taxes? Perhaps one of the worst things to contemplate about sudden death is leaving special sentiments unsaid. There are people who say, I love you at the end of every phone conversation just to make sure it's the last thing said if they get hit by a bus. But that doesn't really do the job of telling your spouse, your children, your grandchildren how you truly feel about them. Let me ask you, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, what things will you wish you had said to the people you love? And in the end, the impact of your life is diminished between the confusion, family squabbles, messy estates planning, and all the things you wish you'd said but didn't. Your legacy comes up short. The aftermath of your death is not nearly as positive as it could have been. What else could go wrong? Generational planning is a modern, intentional, sometimes even fun two-phase process that does away with the worst aspects of estate planning and helps you plan your legacy. For some, a fate worse than death is sudden incapacity. You suffer a stroke, you get hit by a bus, and rather than dying, you end up in a coma. In some ways, this is worse than dying unprepared because you have to go on living. So, who will make decisions about your care? Someone you love and trust, or will you be at the mercy of someone you don't even know because you didn't set things up properly? Here's what can go wrong. Your medical wishes are not honored because no one knows what they are. Hospitals are obligated to do whatever is necessary to keep people alive, even if it involves ventilators and feeding tubes. If this is not what you want, you have to state those wishes now. If you want to appoint a loved one to make medical decisions on your behalf, you have to set this up now while you're still of sound mind and body. And here's what else. Your money is frozen, your bills go unpaid, and your investments are left unattended because you never signed a power of attorney appointing a trust to act on your behalf, a trusted person to act on your behalf. No one else has the authority to transfer money or pay bills or do anything with your finances as long as you're incapacitated. So here's the problem. People equate estate planning with death planning and therefore block it out and never do anything or not enough. The quote here sums it up. One of the greatest obstacles in estate planning is the perpetuation of death denial. Most people don't want to plan for post-death lives because death is a scary topic to even think about. This is true both on a financial level, but also probably more importantly on an emotional and spiritual level. That lifetime of experiences, hard-earned wisdom, and insight that make up our values never get discussed and never get passed on to the next generation. And that's the real loss for everyone. You may be thinking, well, my family knows how I feel about them, and I'm not a best-selling author or Hollywood movie star with tens of millions in the bank. So what does it matter if I don't take the issue seriously? What are the consequences? Think of estate planning as a gift to your family. It allows you to share your wishes and protect the people you care about the most, rather than having the state direct the disposition of your assets. Your death will be an emotional time for them. Make it easier by spelling everything out and leaving no unanswered questions. Common problems that arise when no one thinks about estate planning include no will or trust, overlooked provisions such as guardianship for minors, no tax planning, financial strains, cash shortage for survivors. Also, sometimes decisions are not communicated to next generations. Details not revealed until after death. Family tensions arise after the will is read. Reluctance to make a plan or update a plan. It's really not a good picture. Which is why attorneys, accountants, and financial professionals have been pressing their clients for years to do estate planning. The benefits of estate planning are very real. It spells out healthcare wishes. Possessions go to heirs you choose without wrangling or dispute. Avoids additional unplanned legal expenses, and it provides for loved ones not otherwise protected. But traditional estate planning often doesn't capture the fullness of our lives and our values. So what's missing are the intangible assets we've collected, often the fruits of a life well lived. They include two types of things not included in traditional estate planning, such as character assets, your values, health, spirituality, heritage, purpose, life experiences, talents, and plans for giving, and intellectual assets, your business systems, alliances, ideas, skills, traditions, reputation, and wisdom. Now you're possibly saying to yourself, that's a grim picture. We don't want that to happen in our family. Is there a way to achieve all these things? Not just the nuts and bolts of traditional estate planning. And the answer is yes. It's called generational planning. And it recognizes that we are all much more than just our physical assets accounted for in our estate plan. So here's our definition of generational planning. Generational planning is a modern, intentional, two-phase process that does away with the worst aspects of estate planning and helps you plan your legacy. So generational planning has two objectives. The first objective, legacy planning, is a process for passing on a family's tangible wealth and assets. And the second objective is conveying your family's values and history to the next generation. Both are done for the benefit of the next generation. It's also important to say that generational planning is not driven by documents in the way of a stuffier estate planning process. And so in thinking about the people closest to you, here are some thoughts on key considerations to a successful legacy plan for generations. First, consider your spouse. If you're married, if you were to die first, you need to ensure sufficient income for the rest of your spouse's life, maybe through insurance or just making sure that there are enough assets to draw from. You also want to make sure that whichever of you goes first, the surviving spouse will be able to manage the finances alone. You know, we see many cases where the husband makes the investment decisions and the wife pays the bills. This is a natural division of labor in a marriage, and they're each doing what they do best. Then one of them dies, and the other must take over without having been trained to do so. In the successful legacy, a married couple, while they are both alive, plan ahead and make sure that either spouse can carry on managing the finances, regardless of which spouse goes first. Children need to be prepared for their inheritance. We've all heard stories about trust fund babies and inheritors who have no appreciation or respect for the money that was left to them. Without proper guidance, their tendency is to spend it rather than preserving it for their own future or the future generations. Inheritance planning starts with an understanding of the basic values upon which the inheritance was built, which is to preserve and grow your family's wealth. These values need to be passed on to the kids. Then there are the practical matters of how to specifically invest the money and how to withdraw it without incurring unnecessary taxes and fees. As for the grandchildren, you want them to understand how you lived and what you lived for. Sometimes it's easier to skip a generation when passing on these values. Grandchildren usually have a greater appreciation than children do for what life was like when you were younger and what you learned So seize the opportunity now to start sharing family stories and conveying some of those memories and values you grew up with. And finally, think about all the people you've touched in your life. Think about the causes you care about, the organizations that are doing good work in the world that you contribute to now. Maybe you'd like to leave something to them so they can continue those good works. Naturally, you may be saying to yourself, okay, this makes sense, but how can I do this in a way that's not overwhelming, complicated, or extremely expensive? You don't have to be overwhelmed. Follow a 6-step legacy planning process to start leaving your mark for the next generation. Let me take you through a quick overview of these 6 steps. And in fact, Kelly is going to step in here and she's going to walk through these 6 steps with you.
Yeah, thank you, Lev. I walked through these really quick. The part 1 for incapacity involves planning, and it's very easy. It's the first step, and we like to get this out of the way first. With incapacity planning, it's easy, and people of all ages should do it because of if you have an accident or stroke, it can happen to anyone at any time, no matter what your age is. So there are forms for this. For healthcare, all you do is state a few simple wishes about how you would want to be cared for and name a person to interact with the doctors and make those medical decisions on your behalf. This may be your spouse or one of your children or a close friend. For finances, you would simply sign a power of attorney, giving another person legal authority to act on your behalf. This would allow them to pay your bills, transfer money, and do whatever is needed to keep your finances in order while you're unable to do it for yourself. And again, this can be a spouse, an adult, a close friend, or even a trusted professional. You must be competent to sign these forms, and that's why it's so important to do these now. And it's step one. And once you take this step off, then you'll feel much better. And then we'll tackle step two. So, step two is getting organized. You know that you've been meaning to do this for a while, or maybe you've already started it and you're pretty organized, but not in a way that would make sense to your loved ones if you suddenly weren't around anymore. So the objective in this step is to prepare for the real business of estate planning. First, you need to identify all the properties that you own so that then you'll know how to divvy up among your beneficiaries. This includes all your savings accounts, your investment accounts, retirement accounts, real estate, business interest, significant personal property like your jewelry or artwork, and also your vehicles, anything that you can touch, or bank accounts that you have. But before you ever sit down with an attorney to have your estate plan documents drawn up, you would need to have this list. And this is something that we would sit down with you and work through and make sure that we give you a one-page sheet that you could take to the attorney. And we do that for all of our clients. And of course, if you want to make things easy for your spouse, you want to make sure they have access to all the important papers and passwords. This also includes your social media passwords, any of those kind of things that you want to make sure that they can help take care of if you're not able. And also, like your pets, you need to make a list and what you would like to do with your pets, and simple things even as to get your mail while you're incapacitated, and how would they do that. And it's a non-legal letter that you would leave your survivors, and you would put that with your funeral instructions, put it with your in a safe, and make sure they know where they can find this. In part three, we'll be thinking about the people that you love and the causes you care about. And this is preparation for part four, which is where we really get to the business of estate planning and those documents. But first, part three will be easy for most people. You want to leave everything to your spouse first, and then you have one or two favorite charities that you would want to support. But you do have to think about contingencies. What if your spouse goes before you? Do you want everything to go to your kids? Do you want it divided equally among them or distributed according to need? What about your grandchildren? What about other relatives or friends that might be a part of your estate or some of your prized possessions where they need to go? And what if you have special situations like a child that's you don't feel is ready to handle an inheritance, or a special need child who would lose medical benefits if they were to inherit a large amount of money? These are things that you need to consider before you start working on your estate planning documents. The more you have thought through your family and your charitable wishes, the more efficient the estate planning process will be, and the more money you would save. Also, in this step, it's an important process to preparing your beneficiaries for their inheritance. Now, some families may want to completely be open about who's getting what, while others may prefer to be secretive and avoid family battles. Maybe it's better to have those battles, if they're going to happen while you're still around, to mediate. In any case, you want these people who will be inheriting your assets to know how to manage them, to carry on your intent, to preserve and grow the assets, and not to spend them on frivolous things or lose them to taxes. This is a great time to talk to your spouse and kids about what they might get if you die, and give them some lessons on how to manage. This will be an extremely valuable part of your legacy. And then part four, now we get to the traditional part of estate planning. All those decisions you made in part three about who should get what need to be legalized. That is, there will need to be a mechanism to transfer those assets to your loved ones in a legal manner. So let's take a look at what that may look like. Now, this isn't always done via a will. Sometimes you can transfer assets through account titling If you hold title as a joint tenants with right of survivorship, and if one tenant dies, the property will automatically transfer to the other without going through probate. Another way is through beneficiary designations. If you have an IRA and you signed a beneficiary designation in which you name the person or persons who would inherit the IRA when you die, this allows the assets to pass directly to the beneficiary outside of probate and regardless of what your will says. There are several legal ways to transfer assets to your loved ones after death, but they all need to be coordinated. You may have some accounts titled jointly, you may have signed beneficiary designations, and you may need to have a trust depending on how complex your situation is and whether or not your estate is subject to estate taxes. You will also need a will, a simple will that would pick up any leftovers. And most of the time, that's a vehicle and some small things like that. Some people's estates are very simple. They barely need to see a lawyer, and they can do everything through account titling, beneficiary designations, and a simple will. Other people do need more legal advice, and we can help you make that determination and refer you to an estate planning attorney when we get to this stage. Or if you have an attorney already you work with, we'll work with that attorney to coordinate things on our end, such as making sure your accounts are titled properly and also make sure you have that current up-to-date list that I was talking about earlier. Depending on how much thought you've given to your beneficiaries in Part 3, this step should be pretty quick and straightforward. It's a matter of executing the wishes you've already identified. Laying the groundwork in Part 3 will save you on legal fees, and at the same time, you don't want to rush anything. Talking with an attorney can sometimes make you aware of possibilities you didn't know before, such as planning for contingencies or drawing up the documents so they can't be contested. Good attorneys definitely earn their fees. In Part 5, now this is the fun part. A lot of people think, some people not so much, but this is where you make your life count and something that you would leave behind a piece of yourself. How you do this would be up to you. You can start by simply capturing memories and writing down certain thoughts, such as what you want your children and grandchildren to know about you. You may be planning to compile family photos or family recipes to hand down. Maybe you have a special skill such as gardening or woodworking, and that you would like to pass down to certain family members. This is a great time to start thinking about those tangible, intangible assets that would make your legacy even more valuable to your family. And then Part 6, that's at the end. Once you have all the documents in place, it's great that you're doing that and you have it long before you plan to leave this earth, but that means that a lot can happen between now and then. So you'll need to keep an eye on your plan and revise it if anything changes. Your plan is not set in stone. As your family composition changes, you'll also want to revisit your plan. Whenever there's a marriage, a divorce, a death, or birth of a child, you'll want to take a look at your plan. Or you may want to change your mind about something. You can always amend your documents for any reason at all. Just remember, having the wrong people inherit your money is almost worse than no estate plan at all. So I'm going to let Les take back over now.
Okay. It helps if I put my microphone on there. Thank you, Kelly. Um, so that's our 6-part legacy planning process. We're getting close to wrapping this up. I wanted to review just real briefly. We started by looking at the differences between the Randy Pouch story and the James Gandolfini story. And the key takeaway there was that your legacy is going to be written no matter what, for better or worse. So let's make sure we control the final narrative of our life because things can happen suddenly, death or incapacity. And we saw the consequences of not being prepared, the pain, the confusion, and anger among family members left behind. Then we were introduced to the concept of generational planning and saw how it differs from traditional estate planning. And that led us to the understanding that the first step in the generational planning is to ensure that our tangible wealth and assets get left to the right people or organizations. And then to do that, we just introduced you to the 6 major steps in the legacy planning process. As you look at those 6 steps, you're possibly thinking, That sounds like a lot to achieve. I feel that way too, because it is. But what we found over the years is that when we work together and guide people through the generational planning process, it just helps bring on a sign of relief to those people. And the first thing is the relief. The second is just new excitement and renewed energy to focus on the non-financial aspects of the generational planning. This is the reflective part. It's not legal, it's not business, it's the part where we get to look back on the personal journey and share the stories that we carry in our hearts. This is our gift to the next generation. They may be words or stories, pictures or actions. They may provide hope, they may provide healing. But just as important are the things we say and do that bring us meaning because we realize that we are the carriers of wisdom for our family. And from generation to generation, each of us is a link in the chain that binds our families together. And that link is the mark we leave, and it's our legacy. Hopefully, you're all motivated now to get started on your legacy plan. So let's maintain that motivation by taking action. Here's an example of the activities that would be achieved. And this could take one meeting, two meetings. Some people it may take more. We have a checklist of things that need to be done to get your plan in order. And together we can go through that list, check things off as they are done. Working together will help you stay on track. We can also share resources if needed, like a referral to an estate planning attorney or a tax advisor. We can introduce you to some of the professionals we work with regularly, whom we know are good at what they do. By working together, we can hold each other accountable. We'll have frequent check-ins, deadline dates for getting things done. This is all for your benefit to keep you motivated and engaged so you'll carry through on your plans. And we have a way that you can start right now. So feel free to request a legacy planning assessment here. And imagine how you'll feel when your legacy's all set. A trusted person is ready to step in and help with healthcare decisions or financial dealings if it becomes necessary. Your records are all organized and accessible for your loved ones. Your spouse and other loved ones will be provided for after your death. By leaving behind both tangible and intangible assets, you'll be remembered for the unique contributions to the family and the world. Legacy planning isn't hard. You just have to get started. So let's work together. And that brings us to the close of our formal presentation. So, but before we leave, just remember, just give us a call or reach out to us if you'd like to have an assessment. You can call Janet here at our office at 828-855-2067. She'll be glad to get you on the schedule. So if you have any questions over any of the material that we've presented and maybe you're not ready for an appointment, feel free to give us a call here and to talk to Kelly or myself, or feel free to shoot us an email. However you want to get in touch with us, we'll be glad to answer any questions you do have. And we're truly grateful to our clients and appreciate the opportunity to partner with them on their financial journey. One of our main goals is to help more individuals like you. The highest compliment that we can get here is an introduction to someone that is needing help and that we can serve and use our expertise. So if you know someone that may benefit from our services, we would love you to introduce us to them or invite them to watch one of these presentations or come to our in-person presentations that we have. And once again, to our clients, we really appreciate you and your faith in us. But also, if you do make an introduction, we have what's called a client ambassador program. What happens when that client is introduced to us? We put them on our monthly mailing list, which has some great educational material. Once a month, they'll receive something that should be a benefit to them. When they're ready, they can call us and make an appointment. But in the meantime, for sending us that introduction, you become part of our client ambassadors, and we have an annual event that we put together to celebrate you and celebrate you helping us continue to grow. So last year we had a chef's dinner that was excellent, where we sat and had some good food and wine, and had some good conversation, and it was great. So this year we're looking to do this same thing. So we'd love to see you there. So once again, I want to thank you for joining us, and be on the lookout for future uh, presentations like this.